Habogi. Once upon a time there lived two peasants who had three daughters, and, as generally happens, the youngest was the most beautiful and best tempered, and while her sisters wanted to go out, she was always ready to stay home and do their work. Years passed quickly with the whole family, and one day the parents suddenly perceived that all three girls were grown up, and that very soon they would be thinking of marriage. "Have you decided what your husband's name is to be?" said the father laughingly to his eldest daughter one evening when they were all sitting at the door of the cottage. "You know, that is a very important point."
Yes, I will never wed any man who's not called Sigmund,
answered she. "Well, it is lucky for you that there are a great many Sigmunds in this part of the world," replied her father, "so that you can take your choice. And what do you say?" he added, turning to the second.
Oh, I don't think I could have anyone with a name no more beautiful than Sigurd,
she cried. "Well, you won't be an old maid either," answered he. "There are 7 Sigurds in this village alone. And you, Helga?" As Helga was the youngest and prettiest of the three, and she looked up. She also had her favorite name, but just as she was going to say it, she seemed to hear a voice whisper,
"Marry no one who is not called Habogi."
The girl had never heard that name before, and she did not like it, so she determined to pay no attention. But as she opened her mouth to tell her father that her husband must be named Njal, she found herself answering instead,
"If I do marry, it will be no one except a Habogi."
"Who's Habogi?" asked her father and sisters.
"We never heard of such a person."
"Oh, I can tell you that he will be my husband if I ever have one," returned Helga, and that was all she would say. Before very long, the young men who lived in the neighboring villages or on the sides of the mountains had heard of this talk of the three girls, and the Sigmunds and Sigurds in scores came to visit the little cottage. There were other young men, too, who bore different names, though not one of them was called Habogi. And these thought that they might perhaps gain the heart of the youngest. But though there were more than one Njal amongst them, Helga's eyes always seemed turned other ways. That's well. At length, the two elder sisters made their choice from out of all the Sigurds and Sigmunds, and it was decided that both weddings should take place at the same time. Invitations were sent out to the friends and relations, and when, on the morning of the great day, they were all assembled, the rough, coarse old peasant left the crowd and came up to the bride's father.
"My name is Habogi, and Helga must be my wife,"
was all he said, and though Helga stood pale and trembling with surprise, she did not try to turn and run away. "I cannot talk of such things just now," answered the father, who could not bear the thought of giving his favorite daughter to this horrible old man, and hoped by putting it off that something might happen. But the sisters, who had always been rather jealous of Helga, were secretly pleased that their bridegroom should outshine hers. When the feast was over, Habogi led up a beautiful horse from a field where he had left it to graze, and he bade Helga jump on its splendid saddle, all embroidered in scarlet and gold.
"You shall come back again," said he, "but now you must see the house that you are to live in."
And though Helga was very unwilling to go, something inside her forced her to obey. The old man settled her comfortably, then sprang up in front of her as easily as if he might have been a boy, and shaking the reins, they were soon out of sight. After some miles, they rode through a meadow with grass so green that Helga's eyes felt quite dazzled, and feeding on the grass were a quantity of large, fat sheep, with the curliest and whitest wool in the world.
What lovely sheep! Whose are they?
Cried Helga.
Your Habogi's, answered he. All that you see belongs to him, but the finest sheep in the whole herd, which has little golden bells hanging between its horns, you shall have for yourself.
This pleased Helga very much, for she had never heard or had anything of her own, and she smiled quite happily as she thanked Habogi for his presents. They soon left the sheep behind and entered a large field with a river running through it, where a number of beautiful gray cows were standing by a grate, waiting for a milkmaid to come and milk them.
Oh, what lovely cows!
Cried Helga again.
I'm sure their milk must be sweeter than any other cow's. How I should love to have some. I wonder to whom they belong.
To your Habogi, cried he, and some day you shall have as much milk as you like, but we cannot stop now. Do you see that big gray one with the silver bells between her horns? That is to be yours, and you can have her milked every morning the moment you wake.
And Helga's eyes shone as though she did not say anything. She thought that she would learn to milk the cow herself. A mile further on, they came to a wide common with a short, springy turf, where horses of all colors, with skins of satin, were kicking up their heels in play. The sight of them so delighted Helga that she had nearly sprang from her saddle with a shriek of joy.
Whose are theirs? Oh, whose are they? She asked. How happy any man who is a master of such lovely creatures.
They are your Habogi's, replied he, and one of which you think the most beautiful of all, you shall have for yourself, and learn to ride him.
At this, Helga quite forgot the sheep and the cow.
A horse of my own, said she. Oh, stop one moment. Let me see which I will choose. The white one? No, the chestnut. No, I think after all I like the coal black one the best, with a little white star on his forehead. Oh, do stop, just for a minute.
But Habogi would not listen or stop.
When you are married, you will have plenty of time to choose one,
was all he answered, and they rode on 2 or 3 miles further. At length, Habogi drew the rein before a small house, very ugly and mean-looking, and that seemed on the point of tumbling to pieces.
This is my house, and is to be yours,
said Habogi, as he jumped down and held out his arms to lift Helga from the horse. The girl's heart sank a little, and she thought that the man who possessed such wonderful sheep, cows, and horses might have built himself a prettier place to live in, and she did not say so, and taking her arm, he led her up a few steps. But when she got inside, she stood quite bewildered at the beauty of all around her. None of her friends owned such things, not even the miller, who was the richest man he knew. There were carpets everywhere, thick and soft, and with such deep, rich colors, and cushions were silk, and made you sleepy just to look at them, and curious little figures in china were scattered about. Helga felt as if it would take her all her life to see anything so pretty. And it only seemed a second that she had entered the house when Habogi came up to her.
We must begin the preparations for our wedding at once, he said, but my foster brother will take you home as I promised. In 3 days he will bring you back here with your parents and sisters and any guests you may invite in your company. By that time, the feast will be ready.
Helga had so much to think about that the ride home appeared very short. Her father and mother were delighted to see her, and they did not feel sure that so ugly and cross-looking man as Habogi might not have played her some cruel trick. And after they had given her some supper, they begged her to tell them all she had done. But Helga only told him that they could see for themselves on the third day, when they would come to her wedding. It was early the next morning when the party set out, and Helga's two sisters grew green with envy as they passed the flocks of sheep, cows, and horses, and heard all the best was given to Helga herself. But when they caught sight of the poor little house which was to be her home, their hearts grew light again.
I should be ashamed of living in such a place,
whispered each to the other, and the older sister spoke of her carved stone over her doorway, and the second boasted of the numbers of rooms she had. But the moment they went inside, they were struck dumb with rage at the splendor of everything, and their faces grew white and cold with fury when they saw the dress which Habogi had prepared for his bride, a dress that glittered like sunbeams dancing upon ice.
She shall not look so much finer than us,
they cried passionately to each other as soon as they were alone. When night came, they stole out of the rooms, and taking out the wedding dress, they laid it in an ash pit and heaped ashes upon it. But Habogi, who knew a little magic, and had guessed that they would do that, changed the ashes into roses and cast a spell over the sisters, so that they could not leave the spot for a whole day, and everyone who passed by mocked at them. The next morning, when they all awoke, the ugly, tumble-down house had disappeared, and in its place stood a splendid palace. The guests' eyes sought in vain for the bridegroom, but could only see a handsome young man with a coat of blue velvet and silver, and a gold crown upon his head.
Who is that?
asked Helga.
That is my Habogi,
said she.